The early morning sun cast long shadows across the entrance of Los Angeles's oldest soup kitchen, where Barbara Garcia had been volunteering for the past 15 years. At 62, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a neat bun, she moved with the deliberate grace of someone who had spent a lifetime serving others. The lines around her eyes told stories of both hardship and joy, each wrinkle earned through years of putting others before herself. This morning was like any other, or so it seemed. The familiar aroma of fresh bread and hot soup filled the air as Barbara checked the day's donations. The shelves, usually well-stocked thanks to local businesses, were looking worryingly bare. Times had been tough lately, with more people coming in for meals and fewer donations arriving at their door. Barbara's daughter, Jennifer Lee, worked alongside her mother, carrying on a family tradition of service that had started 3 generations ago. Their small operation had never been about recognition or praise. It was about the simple act of ensuring that no one in their community went hungry. But lately, the weight of their mission had become heavier, the challenges more daunting. The soup kitchen had been housed in the same modest building since 1975, its faded brick walls holding decades of stories. The paint was peeling in places, and the ancient heating system groaned through winter months. But to many in the community, it was more than just a place to get a hot meal, it was a sanctuary of hope. Today's breakfast service would start in an hour, and already a line was forming outside. Barbara recognized many of the faces: the elderly man who had lost his pension, the young mother with 3 small children, the veteran who never spoke but whose eyes conveyed depths of gratitude. Each person had a story, and Barbara had made it her life's work to listen to them all. Jennifer worked efficiently in the kitchen, preparing the morning's offerings with whatever ingredients they had managed to gather. Their regular donations had dwindled over the past months, forcing them to stretch their resources thinner and thinner. Still, they maintained their principle: no one would be turned away as long as they had something to give. The morning light filtered through the windows, catching the steam rising from large pots of oatmeal. Barbara paused in her preparations, her hand resting on a well-worn ledger where she kept track of their inventory. The numbers weren't adding up the way they needed to, but she pushed aside her worry, focusing instead on the tasks at hand. A small television mounted in the corner quietly played the morning news, its sound barely audible over the kitchen's activities. Barbara rarely paid it much attention, but a familiar name caught her ear. Clint Eastwood's daughter had been making headlines for her philanthropic work across the state. The story showed clips of food drives and community outreach programs, reminding Barbara that there were still people out there who understood the importance of giving back. As she watched the report, Barbara couldn't help but think of her own daughter, who had given up a promising career in technology to help manage the soup kitchen. Jennifer had inherited her mother's compassion, along with a fierce determination to make a difference in their community. Together, they had weathered countless challenges, but the current situation tested even their unwavering optimism. The kitchen's back door opened, and William Thomas, their elderly volunteer coordinator, shuffled in with the morning's mail. His arthritis had been acting up lately, but he never missed a day. The small stack of envelopes he carried looked thinner than usual, another sign of the times. "More bills than donations," William said softly, his voice carrying the weight of concern they all shared. "But we'll manage. We always do." Barbara nodded, though the worry lines around her eyes deepened. They had always managed before, but this time felt different. The cost of food had skyrocketed, their ancient refrigerator was on its last legs, and their loyal donor base was feeling the economic pinch just like everyone else. Outside, the line continued to grow. Barbara could see Nancy Brown, a local teacher, helping to organize the crowd, ensuring the elderly and families with children would be served first. It was this spirit of community that had kept the soup kitchen going through countless challenges over the years. The morning progressed with its usual rhythm: the clatter of pots and pans, the murmur of conversations, the quiet thanks of those they served. Barbara moved through it all with practiced efficiency, but her mind kept returning to the dwindling supplies in their stockroom. They would need a miracle to keep operating at this rate. What she didn't know was that fate had already set in motion a chain of events that would change everything. Miles away, in a sleek office overlooking the city, Elon Musk was scrolling through his social media feed when something caught his eye: a local news story about community organizations struggling to meet increased demand. The image accompanying the article showed a familiar face, one he had seen years ago during a chance encounter that had left a lasting impression. The soup kitchen's morning service was in full swing when the door chimed. Barbara looked up, expecting to see another familiar face from the neighborhood. Instead, she found herself frozen in place, recognition dawning slowly as she took in the figure standing in the doorway. Francesca Eastwood, looking far more casual than her recent television appearances would suggest, stood quietly observing the scene before her. She carried no cameras, no entourage, just a simple notebook and what appeared to be a genuine desire to understand the operation. The next few hours would prove to be anything but ordinary, though Barbara couldn't have known it then. She simply did what she had always done, welcomed another soul into their humble space, ready to share whatever they had to give. The morning light continued to strengthen, casting long rays through the windows and illuminating the simple dignity of their work. In the kitchen, Jennifer continued preparing meals, unaware that their world was about to change. William arranged chairs and tables with methodical care, his joints protesting but his spirit unwavering. Life had taught Barbara that the most extraordinary moments often began in the most ordinary ways. As she watched Francesca move through the space, taking notes and asking thoughtful questions, she felt a flutter of something she hadn't experienced in a long time: hope. What she couldn't have known was that across town, Elon Musk was making a phone call that would set in motion a series of events that would transform not just their soup kitchen, but the very fabric of their community. The simple act of serving others with dignity and grace was about to be recognized in ways Barbara could never have imagined. But for now, she simply continued her work, serving each person with the same care and attention she had shown for the past 15 years. The morning sun climbed higher in the sky, warming the old building's walls, while inside, the quiet miracle of human kindness continued to unfold, one meal at a time. Little did Barbara know that this ordinary Tuesday would become the day everything changed, not just for her and Jennifer, but for every person who had ever found hope and sustenance within these worn brick walls. The story that was about to unfold would remind people everywhere that sometimes the most powerful acts of kindness come from the most unexpected sources, and that even in the darkest times, light finds a way to break through. Francesca Eastwood's presence in the soup kitchen created barely a ripple at first. She moved quietly through the space, blending in with the volunteers, her notebook occasionally catching the morning light as she jotted down observations. Barbara Garcia continued her work, though she couldn't help but notice how the young woman's eyes seemed to take in every detail, from the worn tiles beneath their feet to the ancient coffee maker that somehow kept brewing despite its age. In the kitchen, Jennifer Lee was showing Patricia Anderson, their newest volunteer, how to portion the meals to ensure they could serve as many people as possible. The sound of their quiet conversation mixed with the gentle clattering of pots and the hum of the struggling refrigerator, a symphony of service that had played out in this space for decades. What no one in the soup kitchen knew was that across town, Elon Musk sat in his office, his fingers hovering over his keyboard as he read through the local news article for the third time. The image of Barbara Garcia stirred a memory from years ago, a chance encounter at a small cafe where her kindness to a homeless man had caught his attention. He hadn't known her name then, but the way she had handled the situation, with such dignity and grace, had stayed with him. Back at the soup kitchen, Francesca had made her way to the storage room, where William Thomas was conducting his daily inventory. The shelves, typically stocked with canned goods and dry staples, showed more empty space than anyone was comfortable seeing. William's weathered hands trembled slightly as he made notes in the logbook, each entry telling a story of increasing need and decreasing resources. "How long have you been volunteering here?" Francesca asked, her voice gentle and genuinely interested. William looked up, his eyes bright despite their deep-set wrinkles. 23 years, he replied, pride evident in his tone. "Started the day after my wife, Susan Moore, passed away. She always said idle hands make for a heavy heart." As they talked, Barbara could hear fragments of their conversation from where she stood, serving morning coffee to Richard Lewis, an elderly regular who had once been a successful businessman before medical bills had claimed everything he owned. The way Francesca really listened, to William's stories reminded Barbara of her own daughter, that same earnest desire to understand and help. Meanwhile, Elon Musk had begun making calls. His assistant, Lisa Miller, was rapidly taking notes as he outlined his vision. This wouldn't be a simple donation. He had something much bigger in mind. The soup kitchen's location, its history, and most importantly, its people, had sparked an idea that could transform not just this one facility, but potentially change how community support services operated throughout the city. The morning service continued, with Francesca quietly helping to serve meals alongside Barbara and Jennifer. She worked efficiently, as if she had done this many times before, which Barbara would later learn was actually the case. The daughter of Hollywood royalty had been volunteering at various charitable organizations for years, far from the spotlight's glare. Robert Wilson, a local contractor who often helped with building maintenance, arrived for his usual coffee and conversation. His eyes widened slightly at recognizing Francesca, but he simply nodded politely and took his usual seat. This was the kind of place where everyone, regardless of who they were outside these walls, was treated with the same respect and dignity. As the morning progressed, Francesca found moments to speak with various volunteers and regulars. She talked with Nancy Thomas about the increasing number of families seeking help, and with Michael Johnson about the challenges of maintaining the aging facility. Each conversation was noted in her little book, each story adding to a growing picture of both struggle and resilience. What no one realized was that these conversations were being carefully documented for a purpose. Francesca's visit wasn't just about observation, it was about understanding the deep-rooted impact of this place on its community. Her father had taught her that real change came from truly understanding the heart of a situation, not just its surface needs. Around noon, Barbara was surprised to receive a call from Margaret Davis, their contact at the city council. Usually, calls from the council meant new regulations or paperwork, but this time Margaret's voice held an unusual note of excitement. She mentioned something about a potential major donor showing interest in their operation, though she couldn't provide more details yet. Barbara shared the news with Jennifer during their brief lunch break, trying not to let hope rise too quickly. They had received promises before, well-intentioned but ultimately unfulfilled. Still, something felt different about this time. Francesca was still there, now sitting with Christopher Brown, a young veteran who came in 3 times a week. Their conversation was quiet, but Barbara could see Christopher's usual rigid posture gradually relaxing as they talked. It was a small thing, perhaps, but in this place, small things often meant everything. The afternoon brought a surprise visit from Elizabeth Clark, a local news reporter who had covered the soup kitchen stories before. She arrived just as Francesca was helping to clean up from the lunch service, and the two women exchanged a knowing look that Barbara didn't quite understand at the time. As Elizabeth set up her camera, Barbara noticed more people arriving, faces she recognized from various community organizations. Thomas Harris from the downtown shelter, Linda Gonzalez from the food bank, and even David Williams from the city planning office. Something was definitely happening, though she couldn't quite piece it together. Meanwhile, across town, Elon Musk was finalizing details with his team. The plan they were developing went far beyond a simple charitable donation. It was a vision for community transformation, using technology and innovation to create a sustainable model for food security and social support. Back at the soup kitchen, Barbara was starting to feel overwhelmed by the unusual activity. Jennifer noticed her mother's distress and stepped in to manage the growing crowd, directing people to the small meeting room they usually used for nutrition classes. Francesca helped, her quiet efficiency keeping things organized despite the unexpected gathering. William Thomas stood near the kitchen door, his eyes misty as he watched the scene unfold. "Something's changing," he said softly to Barbara as she passed by. "I can feel it in these old bones." The afternoon sun slanted through the windows, casting long shadows across the worn linoleum floor. Barbara found herself standing in the middle of her kitchen, surrounded by the familiar sense of coffee and cleaning supplies, watching as her simple soup kitchen seemed to transform into the center of something much larger than herself. Elizabeth Clark had set up her camera in the corner, occasionally making notes in her reporter's pad. Linda Gonzalez was deep in conversation with Francesca, their heads bent together over what looked like architectural drawings. The energy in the room was electric with possibility. Jennifer approached her mother, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Mom," she said softly, "I think we should sit down. There's something you need to hear." As Barbara took her seat at one of the old folding tables, surrounded by people who had become her extended family over the years, she couldn't help but think of all the meals served, all the lives touched, all the quiet moments of dignity restored within these walls. Whatever was about to happen, she knew it would be built on the foundation of love and service that had sustained this place for so long. The room gradually quieted as Francesca stepped forward, her notebook now closed, her expression both serious and excited. Behind her, Elizabeth's camera light blinked on, recording what was about to become a moment of extraordinary change for everyone in that room. What none of them knew was that Elon Musk was already on his way, his autonomous vehicle navigating through the city streets, bringing with him a vision that would transform not just this soup kitchen, but the very concept of community support in the modern age. The simple act of kindness Barbara had shown years ago, unremembered by her but unforgotten by him, was about to create ripples that would touch countless lives. As the afternoon light deepened to gold, the old building seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the moment when everything would change. Barbara sat straight in her chair, her daughter's hands still on her shoulder, surrounded by the community she had served for so long, about to discover that sometimes the greatest acts of kindness come full circle in ways we could never imagine. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the soup kitchen's windows when the door opened once more. The conversation in the room died down as Elon Musk stepped inside, dressed not in his usual business attire but in a simple black t-shirt and jeans. Behind him, Lisa Miller carried a sleek laptop, while Robert Harris, his head of sustainable initiatives, followed with several rolled-up architectural plans. Barbara Garcia stood instinctively, years of welcoming visitors kicking in despite her surprise. The room remained silent as Elon crossed the space, his presence both commanding and surprisingly humble. He approached Barbara with an extended hand and a warm smile that reached his eyes. "Ms. Garcia," he said, his voice carrying clearly in the quiet room, "we met once before, though you probably don't remember. It was about 5 years ago, at a small cafe in Palo Alto." Barbara's brow furrowed in concentration, trying to recall the encounter. Jennifer Lee stepped closer to her mother, equally puzzled by this unexpected connection. "You showed extraordinary kindness to a homeless man that day," Elon continued. "You didn't just buy him a meal, you sat with him, listened to his story, treated him with dignity. That moment stuck with me." The memory slowly surfaced in Barbara's mind. A rainy morning, a man seeking shelter, a simple act of humanity she had long forgotten. She had no idea anyone had noticed, let alone that it had made such an impression on one of the world's most influential innovators. William Thomas quietly brought over chairs, his weathered hands trembling slightly with excitement as Elon thanked him by name, having clearly done his research on the soup kitchen's long-term volunteers. Linda Gonzalez and Patricia Anderson, who had been helping to clean up from the day's service, paused their work to listen as Elon began to outline his vision. Elizabeth Clark's camera continued to record, capturing what was about to become a pivotal moment in the community's history. "What you've built here," Elon began, gesturing to the space around them, "is extraordinary. Not just the meals you provide, but the dignity, the respect, the sense of community. But imagine what could happen if we combined your wisdom and experience with cutting-edge technology and sustainable innovation." Lisa Miller opened the laptop, and suddenly the wall was illuminated with a projection showing architectural renderings. The familiar outline of their building was there, but transformed. Solar panels crowned the roof, and a state-of-the-art greenhouse extended from the back of the property. "This is just the beginning," Elon continued, his enthusiasm building as he explained each element of the plan. "We're not just going to renovate your kitchen, we're going to create a model for sustainable community support that can be replicated across the country." Robert Harris stepped forward, unrolling the detailed plans across one of the old folding tables. "The greenhouse will use vertical farming technology," he explained, "allowing you to grow fresh produce year-round. We'll install smart systems to optimize energy use and reduce waste. The kitchen itself will be completely modernized, but we'll preserve the character that makes this place special. Barbara sank slowly into her chair, overwhelmed by the scope of what she was hearing. Jennifer squeezed her mother's shoulder, her own eyes wide with amazement as Elon described the training programs they would implement, teaching valuable skills to community members while ensuring the kitchen's long-term sustainability. Thomas Johnson, a local business owner who had been quietly supporting the kitchen for years, raised his hand with a practical question about operating costs. Elon's response revealed the true depth of his commitment. A substantial endowment would be established, ensuring the kitchen's financial security for decades to come. Nancy White, who had been volunteering at the kitchen since her retirement from teaching, couldn't hold back her tears as Elon explained how the renovation would include a dedicated education space, where community members could receive job training, financial literacy education, and other essential skills. But it was when he turned to Francesca Eastwood that the full scope of the project became clear. She opened her notebook, sharing the stories and insights she had gathered throughout the day. These weren't just plans for a building. This was about preserving and amplifying the human connections that made the soup kitchen so special. What Barbara and her team have created here is something technology alone can't replicate, Francesca explained, her voice soft but passionate. It's about human dignity, about being seen and valued. Our goal is to support and enhance that, not replace it. Michael Davis, a regular at the kitchen who had recently secured a job through their informal network, stood up to share how the community had helped him turn his life around. His testimony brought home the human impact of their work and the potential for even greater transformation. As the presentation continued, Barbara found herself thinking of all the faces she had seen over the years, the struggling families, the elderly living on fixed incomes, the veterans trying to rebuild their lives. Each one had left an imprint on her heart, and now, incredibly, they were being offered the means to help even more people. Elizabeth Martin, from the City Council, asked about timeline and permits. Elon's response was characteristically ambitious. Work would begin immediately, with temporary facilities set up nearby to ensure no interruption in services. The entire project would be completed within 6 months, using the same rapid deployment techniques his other ventures were famous for. Jennifer Lee, who had inherited her mother's practical nature, raised questions about training current staff on the new systems. Lisa Miller stepped forward with detailed plans for comprehensive training programs, ensuring that technology would serve the community rather than overwhelm it. As the sun began to set outside, casting the room in warm golden light, Barbara finally found her voice. "Why us?" she asked simply, looking directly at Elon. "Out of all the places you could help, why choose our little kitchen?" Elon's response captured the heart of everything they had built. "Because you understand that feeding people isn't just about food, it's about nurturing hope, dignity, and community. What we're proposing isn't just about modernizing a building. It's about taking the spirit you've created here and giving it the tools to reach even more people." Christopher Anderson, one of their younger volunteers studying sustainable agriculture in college, could barely contain his excitement as he examined the greenhouse plans. The possibilities for teaching and learning seemed endless. The meeting continued as darkness fell outside, with questions and answers flowing freely. Members of the community who had dropped by earlier now sat fully engaged, offering suggestions and insights that would help shape the final plans. Richard Harris, a retired architect who often helped with building maintenance, pointed out areas where the historical character of the building could be preserved while still incorporating modern elements. His expertise was immediately noted and welcomed by the project team. As the evening wore on, the initial shock began to transform into purposeful excitement. Barbara watched as her community, the family she had built over 15 years of service, began to embrace the possibility of change while holding firm to their core values. What touched her most was how Elon and his team listened, really listened, to every concern and suggestion. This wasn't a corporate takeover but a true collaboration, one that honored the history and heart of what they had built while opening doors to an extraordinary future. The simple soup kitchen that had started with a mission to feed the hungry was about to become a beacon of innovation and hope, showing how technology and compassion could work hand in hand to create lasting change in communities everywhere. As the meeting drew to a close, Barbara found herself surrounded by her extended family, volunteers, regulars, community leaders, all unified in their excitement for what lay ahead. The path forward would require hard work and adaptation, but the potential for impact was beyond anything she had ever dreamed possible. What none of them knew was that this was just the beginning. The transformation of this humble soup kitchen would spark a movement that would spread far beyond their community, touching lives in ways they couldn't yet imagine. But for now, in the gathering darkness of an extraordinary evening, hope filled the room like a tangible presence, as bright and warm as the love that had sustained them for so many years. The transformation began the very next morning. Before the sun had fully risen, a fleet of vehicles arrived carrying equipment, supplies, and a team of professionals ready to begin the massive undertaking. Barbara Garcia stood on the sidewalk with Jennifer Lee, watching in amazement as their modest soup kitchen became the center of what felt like a carefully choreographed dance of progress. Elon Musk had kept his word about maintaining services during the renovation. A temporary facility had been set up in the community center 2 blocks away, equipped with brand new appliances and staffed by a combination of their regular volunteers and additional support personnel. William Thomas stood at the entrance, clipboard in hand, ensuring their regulars knew where to find their morning meal. Patricia Anderson and Linda Gonzalez had arrived early to help with the transition, their familiar faces providing comfort to community members who might otherwise have felt unsettled by such dramatic change. The temporary space, though different, still carried the warmth and dignity that had always characterized their service. Elizabeth Clark's news report had aired the previous evening, and already the story was spreading far beyond their local community. Barbara's phone hadn't stopped ringing with calls from other community organizations, journalists, and people wanting to help. Lisa Miller, now acting as a liaison between the soup kitchen and Elon's team, helped manage the overwhelming response. Robert Harris, overseeing the renovation project, worked closely with Richard Lewis, their longtime volunteer maintenance manager, to ensure that every change respected the building's history while embracing its future. The architectural plans, now displayed in the temporary facility's entrance, drew constant attention from volunteers and visitors alike. What touched Barbara most deeply was watching how the community embraced the change. Michael Johnson, who had been coming to the kitchen for years, now sat with one of Elon's tech specialists, learning how the new inventory management system would work. His eagerness to contribute and learn symbolized everything they hoped to achieve. Francesca Eastwood continued her involvement, working alongside Nancy White to document the kitchen's history and stories. These weren't just records for posterity, they would become part of an interactive display in the new facility, ensuring that the heart and soul of their mission would be preserved and shared with future generations. As the first week of construction progressed, something remarkable began to happen. Other businesses and organizations, inspired by Elon's initiative, started reaching out with offers of support. Thomas Harris from the downtown shelter arrived with news of additional funding for job training programs. Margaret Davis brought word of expedited permits and municipal support. Barbara found herself at the center of a movement that went far beyond providing meals. The temporary facility became a hub of activity, with computer literacy classes running alongside their regular meal service. Christopher Brown, the young veteran who had found purpose volunteering in their kitchen, now led a support group for other veterans, sharing his story of hope and recovery. One morning, about 2 weeks into the project, Elon made an unannounced visit. He arrived without fanfare, joining the breakfast service line and chatting with regulars as if he were any other volunteer. Barbara watched as he listened intently to Sandra Martinez, an elderly woman who had been coming to the kitchen for years, as she shared her dreams of learning to use a computer to video chat with her grandchildren. That same afternoon, Lisa Miller arrived with news that would take their transformation even further. Elon had been so moved by his conversations with their community members that he was expanding the project's scope. The educational center would now include a full computer lab, and they would be partnering with local colleges to provide certification programs in technology and sustainable agriculture. Jennifer Lee found herself working closely with Robert Wilson, the project's sustainability expert, learning about the vertical farming systems that would soon provide fresh produce for their meals. Her eyes lit up with excitement as she described to her mother how they would be able to grow vegetables year-round, even teaching their community members urban farming techniques they could use at home. The construction team, led by David Williams, worked with incredible efficiency, but also with obvious care and respect for the space. They understood that they weren't just renovating a building, they were handling a community's heart and history. Each evening, they carefully cleaned up their work area, ensuring the temporary facility could continue operating smoothly. As word of the project spread, other communities began reaching out, eager to learn how they might implement similar transformations. Barbara found herself hosting visitors from other cities, sharing not just the technical details of their upgrade, but the importance of maintaining the human connection that made their work meaningful. The greenhouse was the first component to near completion. Through the temporary walls, Barbara could see the gleaming glass structure taking shape, its innovative design allowing for maximum natural light while maintaining energy efficiency. Susan Thompson, their longtime cook, was already planning how to incorporate fresh herbs and vegetables into their meals. 1 month into the project, Elon called a community meeting. The temporary facility was packed as he shared the project's progress and some unexpected additions to the plan. The building next door, long abandoned, would be converted into transitional housing, providing a stepping stone for community members working to get back on their feet. That evening, as Barbara sat in her office reviewing the day's events, she found herself overcome with emotion. On her desk sat a framed photo from the day she had first opened the soup kitchen, alongside architectural renderings of what it would soon become. The contrast was striking, but the mission remained the same: to serve their community with dignity and love. William Thomas knocked gently on her door, his eyes twinkling with the same joy she felt. "Did you ever imagine," he asked, settling into a chair, "that your simple act of kindness in that cafe would lead to all this?" Barbara shook her head, still amazed by how that forgotten moment had sparked such transformation. "It just shows you never know how far a simple act of kindness can reach," she replied, her voice soft with wonder. As the project entered its final phases, the impact on the community became increasingly evident. James Martinez, who had once come to them for meals, was now employed as part of the maintenance team for the new facility. Elizabeth White, a former client, was training to manage the new inventory system. Everywhere Barbara looked, she saw hope taking root and growing. The day before the new facility was set to open, Elon gathered the entire team, construction workers, volunteers, community members, and staff, for a private tour. As they walked through the transformed space, Barbara felt as though she were dreaming. The ancient coffee maker had been replaced by a state-of-the-art beverage station. The worn tables were now adjustable workstations that could serve multiple purposes. Yet somehow, the space still felt warm and welcoming. The kitchen gleamed with new equipment, but Susan Thompson's familiar spice rack still held its place of honor on the wall. The computer lab hummed with energy-efficient machinery, while the walls displayed photographs documenting their community's history. It was a perfect blend of progress and preservation. In the greenhouse, Jennifer Lee demonstrated the vertical farming system to an amazed group of volunteers. Fresh herbs and vegetables already grew in neat rows, promising sustainable, nutritious additions to their meals. The space would also serve as a classroom, teaching valuable skills to community members interested in urban agriculture. As the sun set on their final day in the temporary facility, Barbara gathered her team for a quiet moment of reflection. Tomorrow, they would open the doors to their transformed space, but tonight was for remembering how far they had come and honoring the spirit that had brought them here. The story of their transformation had already inspired similar projects in other cities. Elon's vision, combined with their community's heart, had created something revolutionary, a model for how technology and compassion could work together to address society's most pressing needs. But for Barbara, the most meaningful measure of their success wasn't in the gleaming new equipment or innovative systems. It was in the eyes of their community members, shining with renewed hope and purpose. It was in the way William Thomas stood straighter, proud to be part of something so meaningful. It was in the sound of laughter and conversation that filled their space, just as it always had. As she locked up the temporary facility for the final time, Barbara thought about that day in the cafe, about how a simple moment of kindness had set in motion something far greater than she could have imagined. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, but the heart of their mission remained unchanged: to serve their community with dignity, respect, and love, now equipped with tools to make an even greater impact. The story of the soup kitchen's transformation would continue to inspire others, reminding people everywhere that when compassion meets innovation, extraordinary things are possible. But perhaps more importantly, it would remind them that every act of kindness, no matter how small, has the power to change lives in ways we may never know.